Hi everyone, welcome to week 12. We're going to continue looking at comparisons. We're going to expand upon the comparative forms we learned before, and we're going to learn a new adjective slash pronoun, which is quidam. So we'll start with quidam. The most important thing to point out is that dam is a fixed suffix, meaning that is not going to give you any grammatical information. You can see that it's dom, dom, dom throughout all of the forms. What comes before the dom, that is what gives you your grammatical information. And once you sort of draw that line, you can see that it is essentially the forms of the relative pronoun with that dom added on. All right, the one change to point out is that any M ending becomes an N before the dom. So quem becomes quin dom. All right, otherwise it is exactly the same as the relative pronoun in terms of forms. And what this means is a certain, right? So it's like a pseudo-indefinite pronoun. So like a certain man came to the door, right? So it's like this one specific man, but you don't know much more beyond that. All right, and it's just going to agree with nouns the way any other adjective would. It will sometimes be used substantively, and remember, substantively means without a noun to modify, and then you just use the gender to supply a noun when you translate it. So quidam, masculine, is a certain man. Quidam, feminine, is a certain woman. All right, so those are the basics, I should say. I was looking around, finding some things, and this was an interesting example. So this is the city of Rutland, Vermont. This apparently is a new motto, and you can see the quidam there. All right, and again, remember that we draw that line, so it's just qui, so the qui agrees with the amici. All right, so certain of my best friends, some of my best friends, all right, quidam amici optimi mei. Some of my best friends are Muslim, all right, and that's the musulmanes there. Now, technically, and I don't know whether somebody sort of noticed this or whatever, that should be an I. So that US should be an I ending to agree with things. But the important part is that quidam, right, is agreeing with the amici, and technically quidam amici optimi mei are all nominative plurals, right? So certain of my best friends, certain best friends of mine are Muslim. All right, and I included in the next kind of just an article sort of explaining where this came from. Apparently this was in response to some anti kind of Muslim sentiment in the city, and so they made a new motto to kind of address that. So you can read that if you want, but I thought that was kind of an interesting example and use of Latin. All right, so shifting gears a little bit, and again, quidam is just a question of learning those forms. So when we're dealing with comparatives in the English word than, all right, Latin can express that than in two different ways, the ablative of comparison or quam, all right? And so when you have the ablative of comparison, it's always going to be ablative, right? So the than is kind of contained in that ablative, and that it is ablative is what tells you that it's going to be translated than. Obviously, you need a comparative word for that to go with that, right? I can't have an ablative of comparison. I can't have a than without an or a more word. All right, but if you have one of those comparative forms and you have an ablative, there's a good chance, it won't always be, but there's a good chance that it will be the ablative of comparison. We'll see some examples of that. All right, the other way to say than is with the word quam, just straight to quam, the Latin word quam. And quam will, to some extent, function like an equal sign in that it will connect the two things being compared by case. So whatever the primary word case is, that's what the comparisons word case will be as well, with quam in the middle. All right, and again, we'll take a look at some examples of that as well. So when you're saying the English word than, you have the ablative comparison, which is always ablative and no other word, or you have quam, the word itself, and it connects them by case. So let's take a look at some else. All right, so a saying in English you might be familiar with. All right, calamus is pen. All right, and gladio is sword. All right, and fortior, of course, is stronger. So the pen right, is stronger, or in English colloquially we might say mightier. The pen is mightier, gladio, okay, than the sword. And that gladio, right, that's our ablative of comparison. All right, so the pen is mightier than the sword. So there's that comparative word, the fortior. All right, and with the ablative gladio and the comparative, that's where the translation, that's where the than comes from. So that than is contained in that gladio, in that ablative. All right, now if we were to use quam, all right, calamus, quam gladius fortior. All right, the idea being that because calamus is nominative, gladius is nominative, connected by quam. So calamus gladio fortior, ablative comparison, and calamus quam gladius fortior, quam, those are equivalent expressions. Those mean the same thing. All right, so that's what I mean by the ablative comparison. Always ablative, no matter what case the first word is, versus quam, the word being compared is going to be the same case as whatever the original word is. Gladius is nominative because calamus is nominative. All right, so again, equivalent expressions said two different ways. All right, here's another one, a little more complex. All right, so mobilior is our comparative word, agreeing with sapientia. All right, and then omnibus, mobilibus are our ablatives of comparison. They agree, obviously. All right, so wisdom, all right, sapientia, is more mobile, more flexible than, T-H-A-N, than all sort of mobile things. All right, so wisdom is more important, right, than all the other things. All right, again, just by virtue of comparison, sapientia, mobilior, quam omnes. Actually, you know what? That's going to be neuter. Apologies. So really, it should be omnia. Quam omnia mobilia. All right. So again, same thing, right? Now that we're using quam, the thing being compared, it goes into the same case as the original, and there are nominatives to go with the nominative sapientia or wisdom. All right. So equivalent expressions. One using quam for than, one using the ablative comparison for than. All right, quam can also be used as than in a verbal way, meaning rather than. All right, and so that's what we see here. There's a fairly common motto. It's the seal of the state of North Carolina as well as Appalachian State University, but it's the motto for other things as well. Okay, so two infinitives, esse and videri. All right, so to be, esse, rather than, again, T-H-A-N, rather than to seem or to be seen, right? So the idea of like you're being more genuine than sort of putting on airs or kind of faking things. So to be, right, rather than to be seen or to seem with an M, right? And that quam is the rather than, right? And so it's basically than when it's used with nouns, and it's usually rather than when it's used with verbs, as we see here. Kind of a fun footnote to that. This is Stephen Colbert, if you recognize him. Before he had his late night show, he had a show on Comedy Central called The Colbert Report, where he was sort of an exaggerated and satirical version of himself. And his motto, this he kind of ended every show in this little sort of living room type place. His motto, if you can read it, is the same, but in reverse. Videri quam esse. So to seem, to appear, rather than to be. And that sort of fit with his persona as this very sort of bloviated, exaggerated character who is very concerned about what people thought of him. So again, just kind of a fun footnote, a reversal of that. All right, so this is from the University of Miami in Ohio. Same thing, two infinitives with quam in between, and the same basic idea, to be useful, prodesse, rather than to be seen, to be sort of viewed. All right, so again, sort of staying out of the limelight for the limelight's sake, just being useful, kind of doing what you're supposed to do. Prodesse quam conspici. All right, and that conspici, by the way, is that present passive infinitive of the third IO, which is a tricky one to pick up. All right, so this is the motto of a university in Poland. This, of course, according to the internet. Not like I know these things off the top of my head. So reason more than force, or more reason plus ratio than force, quam vis. All right, and again, that's that comparison using quam. All right, if I wanted to rewrite this with the ablative of comparison, so plus ratio, oh, sorry, went a little English there, plus ratio we, and vis is a bit of an irregular verb, so we is the kind of funky ablative. But again, no quam, right? Quam disappears, and then we goes into the ablative no matter what case the original is. So reason more than force, or more reason than force, either plus ratio quam vis or plus ratio we. All right, they both mean the same thing, just in two different ways. All right, so here are some texts to look at. So there are two comparatives in the excerpt above, adjectives or adverbs, and then there are two ablatives of comparison. All right, so perennius and altius. All right, we won't deal with ablative adjectives versus adverbs, but the ablatives of comparison are ire, all right, and situ. All right, so just to hear this in action, I have built a monument, all right, more lasting, perennius, than bronze. Okay, so I built a monument more lasting than bronze. Perennius agrees with monumentum, and then ire is the ablative of comparison. All right, I have built a monument, same verb, higher, taller, altius, than the regal site of the pyramids. All right, so again,